Could the solution to chronic illness be hiding in plain sight? Today, I sit down with Bryant Meyers, a leading expert in energy medicine and the author of PEMF, the fifth element of health. Bryant is here to help us understand pulsed electromagnetic field therapy and help us understand how this therapy works at a cellular level, potentially boosting your body's natural healing abilities. Learn fascinating connections between PEMF, cancer, and your overall well-being. Stay until the end to hear Bryant's crucial advice on choosing the right PEMF device for you. He warns about some of the popular products that might do more harm than good, giving you insider knowledge to make smart choices for your health. You're listening to the Born to Heal podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Katie Deming. After 2 decades of practicing as an oncologist and caring for thousands of patients, I've seen firsthand how our healthcare system places obstacles in your path to true healing. My guests and I will bridge the worlds of Western medicine and alternative healing to help you achieve optimal health. Expect to uncover new insights, share a few laughs, and maybe even shed some tears along the way. But most of all, we'll learn how to heal from within together. So let's dive into today's episode. Bryant, thank you for being here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our conversation.
I love it. So, what I want to start with, Bryant, can you explain what is PEMF?
Yeah.
And why should we care about it?
So PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Fields. And these are actually, again, what's a pulsed electromagnetic field? So I like to use the word pulsed magnetic field, just to be clear. Because with a PEMF like coil, when say this is the IRS coil here, the magnetic field lines come through it such that you're getting what looks like a bar magnet. Like if you could see the field lines coming through, but unlike a magnet, it's pulsing. So it's a changing magnetic field. And so a static magnet is just a static. I tell people, like with the soap bubble analogy, imagine like the magnetic field is like a bubble, a soap bubble. And if it was a static magnet, the bubble would be stationary, like most soap bubbles. A PEMF is like a bubble that's vibrating. So imagine like you're blowing on the bubble and it's like rippling and vibrating. So what they found in the late 70s with like the Eastern European studies was that PEMFs were working better than static magnets, like almost 2 or 3 times as good. And static magnets do have benefit, just using static magnets on acupoints, or remember the old magnetic mattress pads? I think those are still around. They're still around. I think they're still around. But because of the changing magnetic field, which is called the slew rate is a word that they use, which is Faraday induction, you get induced microcurrents in tissue. So it's more dynamic. So it's like swiping a credit card, right? You need to swipe it fast. You get more impulse. The credit card magnet on the back of your credit card, if you just put it in the reader and didn't move it, you're not going to get it. It's not going to read it. To get a current, you got to swipe it. You got to change the magnetic field. So what they found was that this changing magnetic field is what really creates a lot of the healing benefits. And even static magnets, if it wasn't for the fact that blood and ions were moving relative to a static magnet, there'd probably be no effects at all of static magnets. Static magnets work because your body is in motion. So relative to a static field, you've got currents or charges that are moving. Just like relativity, right? So if you're riding on one of those little charges in your body, looks like the field's changing to your reference frame, right? Because you're stationary where you're sitting on a little charge. So it's the changing magnetic fields that really have all the wonderful benefits. And in fact, I call it PEMF 3D microcurrent therapy because it's inducing deep into your tissue all these healing microcurrents through Faraday induction. Again, when you have that quickly changing field, you get more microcurrents. And microcurrents stimulate things like cell voltage, they stimulate ATP, they stimulate healing, stem cells, regeneration. In fact, the NASA study showed with a good square wave, which is one of the best signals for a sharp rise and fall. And if you can visualize that, right, a square wave is going straight up, right? The field is changing quickly, like swiping that credit card fast. So the NASA study found an upregulation of like 150 positive genes that were like healing related genes and a 400% increase in neuronal stem cells. So through those healing microcurrents, and then of course they defined the word slew rate in that study. Well, it's a word that's been known, but it's kind of one of the first places we can see, like in PEMF research, like a more emphasis on slew rate. So it turns out with a PEMF, which by definition is a changing magnetic field, We actually want a quickly changed magnetic field. It gives us even more benefit. So a simple sine wave is not as ideal, right? Because it's changing slowly. I mean, you will get some induction effects, but not as much as a sharp rise and fall, right? So PMFs and they're also natural. So you might say, well, is this just something artificial that, and that's actually Dr. Magna Havas, a worldwide expert in electrosmog, was very skeptical of PMF initially. But then when she looked at her blood under live blood microscopy, we couldn't believe how in 8 minutes the Rayleigh effect just was gone and the cells were all plump and they had a halo around them. She's like, and so she went after that realization, she started talking about bad EMFs and good PEMFs. And it turns out that nature, the Schumann resonant frequencies in nature are, it's a PMF, right? We're surrounded, if we're out in the woods, by really good, healthy magnetism of the earth. And even the big geomagnetic field of the earth vibrates. It's not just a static field. People think that the earth's a big bar magnet, right? Well, HeartMath has actually done some really good tests on that. Roland McCready, I don't know if you've had him on your show, but yeah. So he found that with their testing, because they have some very sensitive squids around the world, and they could see that between like 0.1 up to to 3 hertz, that the Earth's magnetic field was vibrating. So it turns out even what we think is our static magnetic field is a changing magnetic field, even though very slow changing. And that's a stronger field than the Schumann's like picotesting, very, very low intensity. And by the way, HeartMath, they are constantly monitoring Schumann resonance. So we know that these fields are essential, and there's been some good studies. Rutger Weber was the first one, did the underground bunker study. He found people separated, shielded from the Earth's magnetism, they would have all kinds of problems. And when they just simply add the little 10 hertz, like Schumann type of frequency pulsar, the symptoms went away. Valerie Hunt at UCLA did like zero field studies where she looked at like college volunteers. You volunteer when you're in college for some of these experiments. And she found that the healthy college students were exhibiting disorientation in a zero field, meaning when you're blocking it, we're blocking out all the Earth's fields. So her zero field test was done in a big new steel chamber, which blocked out all these fields that were natural. And people, they just got all kinds of problems. I mean, they got depression and their mood, their pain intensified. Again, disorientation, dizziness. Because again, I mean, without the magnetic field, it was like you kind of lose the sense of up or down. So it turns out that those studies and others have shown that not only are these natural energies on planet Earth, but we need them. Just like we need food, water, oxygen, all the essential nutrients that we know. A lot of people don't know that PMF is like a fifth element of health, which is the name of my book, right? That's the thesis of my book, is that PMF is not only good for us, it's essential. And if we don't get it, we get sick.
Yeah, that's super helpful. So if you could speak to what were some of those things. So you said, mood, pain, some of those things when we take the PMFs that are natural, what are the things that people experience if you're not getting that input?
Yeah. So, right. So again, with these studies anyway, the zero field studies, one thing I forgot to mention was fatigue too. In fact, Dr. Nakagawa called it magnetic deficiency syndrome, where he observed construction workers that were always in these big concrete and steel structures. And of course, concrete and steel, the steel blocks out partially. It's like a kind of partial Faraday cage. So they weren't getting as much magnetism. And so he called it magnetic deficiency syndrome. And he even linked like fibromyalgia to a magnetic deficiency syndrome. So there was this increased sensation of pain and of fatigue. So, again, not having as much energy and kind of a depression. It was a mood aspect to it too. If you're not getting, it's like think about when you're inside and really disconnected from nature for long periods of time, it starts to wear on you psychologically. Then you go back out into nature, you go to the beach, and all of a sudden your mood just goes right back up again, right? So, and there's other facets to that, but certainly one of them is the natural energies of the earth.
Hey, it's Dr. Katie. You may have noticed that I talk a lot about water on this podcast. After a year of research, I've learned that optimal water needs 3 key elements: filtration, mineralization, and structure, just like natural spring water. Doing all these steps to my own drinking water took me several hours a week. That's why I'm so impressed with Spring Aqua. Their system incorporates all 3 elements in one system that is basically modeling its technology after the renowned healing waters of the spring at Lourdes, France. I personally use their Wet 7 model, which offers alkalinized hydrogen water and saves me hours each week. Spring Aqua has dramatically improved hydration for both me and my family, and I believe it could do the same for you. I recently had the owner, Kenny Lou, on the show, and his integrity really shines through in this product. If you're interested in experiencing truly hydrating water that mimics nature's process, please visit the link in the episode description. That's helpful. And so with pulse magnetic frequency in terms of an intervention or something that people can use in healing, what are the things that PEMF is helpful for? Like if someone were looking to use this to help with their health and well-being or heal an illness, can you talk about some of those things that we have data for with PEMF?
Oh, yeah. So just it's important to note that there is like at least a dozen or more PEMF devices FDA approved. So even our hard-headed medical system still acknowledges FDA as a safe and effective modality for things from everything from depression to non-union fractures to pain, inflammation, tissue swelling is one that's an FDA approved. There's actually a couple FDA approved devices for the bones specifically. And it's not uncommon that orthopedic surgeons, I just had a guy who said, oh yeah, I got this whatever procedure for my neck, and he sent me home. It was like a PMF thing. He was supposed to wear 12 hours a day. So it's becoming even in hospitals and by surgeons and medical system being used for recovery. So it seems to be the main reason people seem to be looking for it is typically for pain, inflammation, some type of like whether it's usually it's like back pain, their shoulders, their knees, neck pain. Sometimes it's, mid back, just different types of injuries. Hip is another one, where people get problems. So pain and inflammation is probably the number one reason people get PMF. And it works wonderfully. I probably, with one of the main, I do affiliate for multiple products, but the main one I affiliate for is the IMRS. And our number one testimonial that we get is pain relief and just recovery. Like I had Molly Rose, this lady, she broke her elbow and the doctor said 3 months. And I told her, cause she was just watching TV every night. It's like, well, just put your elbow on the pillow every night while you're watching TV and just crank it up to 400 and do it for like an hour, 2 hours a night. Cause there's no time limit for like arms, legs, low back and hips. And she healed like in a month. And the doctors, when she went in, it's like, what are you doing? How is this possible? Your bone's already healed. So we've seen that whatever the doctors will say how long it takes to heal, PMF seems to cut that time in half on the average. Sometimes a little quicker, sometimes a little longer, but it seems on the average the healing is twice as fast. So it's stimulating like healing regeneration. This goes back to Robert Becker and his original salamander studies. He found it's like, well, why do salamanders regenerate their arms when frogs, a very close cousin to salamanders, don't? And through investigation, he realized that when you cut a salamander's arm off, there's a high voltage at the stump, where the frog did not have a high voltage. And what they found is when they put electrodes to increase the voltage of the frog's arm or the frog's stump, the frog could regrow a limb too. So healing is voltage, right? So what PMFs are doing, because it's a changing magnetic field through Faraday's law, induces what's called an EMF, or in this case, it's electromotive force. That's voltage. PMFs are increasing voltage. And we know there's all kinds of ions in the body, calcium, sodium, magnesium, potassium, all these different charged particles and proteins and different structures in our body are charged. Even like, easy water has like a plus and minus charge to it. So all these charged objects or particles in the body will be influenced by a change in magnetic field, will move those charges. So in the case of increasing ATP by 400%, which one study showed PMF does, it's increasing the movement of electrons across the electron transport chain, across the voltage of every cell, transmembrane potential. It helps to move sodium potassium ions to help increase that potential. Because, we are electrical beings. I got this I don't know if you ever see these little things. And so it's like, it just shows that you're electric. So like I put my finger here, right? Just
because this is mostly audio, so they're not going to have the visual. Can you explain what you're holding?
Oh, I'm just holding this little energy stick. And what it's doing, you can look up energy stick online and you'll see, you put your hand on one electrode, and to show that your body conducts is energetic and conducts electricity, when you hit the other, so the electricity is going from one hand all the way to the other. In fact, you can get these in a group of like 20 people. And if everybody's holding hands, the energy goes through everybody and back to the other side. So,
wow.
so we are electrical beings. We do conduct energy. So this is showing when PMF is increasing the voltage, it is moving charges, just as this. I mean, again, charges are moving just from me touching this electrode because the body conducts electricity, right? So we're not like some inert, like just clumps of clay clumps of clay that we have it. There's more to us than just the physical body. We have this biofield, which is the word science now uses, biofield. New Age or spiritual tradition might call it like an aura, but science, this is now scientific now. It's measurable. It's a measurable field. And so we're definitely electrical, magnetic, photonic beings of light, of energy, as well as, yes, we have a physical dimension too. So PMFs are really working a lot with that energetic side to our being. And again, it's nobody can deny that we're electrical beings. I mean, just the EKG of your heart or EEG of your brain, they're measuring electrical activity. And from heart math, I mean, the field from the heart being the most electrical, because anything with an electrical flow creates a magnetic field by Ampere's law. So because the heart's the most electrical organ in the body, it has the biggest magnetic field, which can be measured 5 to 10 feet into space. So our biofield, the magnetic component to it, is measurable by science 5 to 10 feet into space, which means you don't end at your skin. And there was a study like in the 60s that showed this for the first time. And it should have been, to me, a big watershed moment for science. It's like, hey, we don't end at our skin. Our fields are measurable into space, right?
Absolutely. Well, and also, when talking about this in terms of voltage and us being electromagnetic beings is, with cancer. So many people who listen to me on this podcast are dealing with cancer.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we know is that the voltage is decreased in cancer cells. And I'm wondering if you can speak to the role of PMFs in either the absence or, what contributes to with cancer with this lower voltage and how PMFs may be able to help people with cancer.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so all interconnected because you have a couple things that seem different. Like you have cancer seems to thrive in an acidic environment. It seems to thrive when there's poor circulation, when there's low oxygen, and when there's low cellular voltage. It turns out all four of those are connected. So the voltage across the cell membrane, in fact, let's start with pH. If you get like a pH meter to measure the pH of a solution, it's actually like a voltmeter. So you can directly convert voltage to pH. So our body should be slightly alkaline, like, 7.35 to 7.45 pH in like an average tissue, right? The stomach's more acidic and some small intestine's more alkaline, but on the average, we should. So this translates into a cellular voltage that should be on the average 60 to 70 millivolts and, or more. Up the heart's like around 90 millivolts. And notice that we never hear about heart cancer. Isn't that an interesting thing? Wonder why is that we never hear anybody getting heart cancer? It's because the heart cells are the most highest voltage cells. So if you look at Dr. Otto Warburg was kind of the first to see not only the connection with oxygen, but also cell voltage. That when the cells started losing their voltage, you started to get sick. There was and when you got to the bottom of, say, 15 millivolts versus 70, that's like a battery that's almost on empty or on lowest charge, like red, right? So cancer seems to happen when the cells really drop to that really low voltage, which means also it's in an acidic environment because a low voltage is always acidic. Because what are acids? Acids are electron stealers, right? So they're oxidizing things. Where if you're slightly alkaline, you have a surplus of electrons. So that's what an antioxidant is, right? It's donating electrons. So we should be around in a healthy cell. It should have a lot of electrons, a lot of electric charge. Cancer cells are acidic. They got more positive charge. Less, and again, we want more of these electrons, more of this negative charge. So here, negative is positive for your health. It doesn't say. So now, okay, so we got the voltage now, but oxygen plays a role in all of this too, because 40% of your ATP is used to charge the cell voltage, the transmembrane potential. And that's just medical textbooks. I mean, you and I kind of know a lot about Jerry Pollock's stuff, and that how ATP has maybe a different role, and that the transmembrane potential is, it's probably, I mean, it's just not enough energy to do what it's supposed to do. But even by their definitions in textbooks, a lot of the cell energy is going to keep this voltage, which what do you need for ATP? You need oxygen. And again, this is the Warburg effect, right? So cancer cells, even when there's oxygen around them, they're using 15 times more sugar or glucose than average cells to create the fermentation. So they're creating ATP by fermentation or glycolysis, which then has all these acidic byproducts. They call it the lactic acid. It's actually better to call it the lactic acid or fermentation cycle, right? Because you're literally like a little brewery going on. You know, you're making very little energy from this process. It's only like 2 to 4 ATPs instead of 38. And you're creating all this acidic waste product, lactic acid and alcohol type of byproducts. So what happens is this downward spiral. So the pieces to the puzzle are the Warburg effect, cell voltage, you know, alkalize or die type of thing. You know, the idea that we need to get rid of this acidic environment, but you see how they're all connected. So what PEMF is doing is it's helping in all those areas. So it's helping to increase oxygenation. Because again, if you're not getting enough oxygen to your cells, you know, you're not going to have what you need to create ATP, because oxygen is the final electron acceptor. Without oxygen, the whole electron transport chain gets short-circuited. And then you end up with glycolysis. Even like if you're a marathon runner, you've all had the experience of hitting the wall, right? Or even if you're not a marathon runner, if you just exercise to where you've overdone it, you just hit that point where all of a sudden you're just gassed. You just can't. You probably hit glycolysis, where you don't have enough oxygen to create enough energy. So people like when they get in a more cancerous zone are like, even without having to exercise, they're just kind of in a low oxygen. They're not getting enough oxygen. So PEMF first helps increase oxygenation and circulation. You know, one of the benefits of PEMF is increases nitric oxide too, which helps to improve microcirculation, gets the oxygen down in the capillaries so they get into the cells. Then the second big thing is at the cell membrane, a couple things are happening. PEMF helps the cells to breathe better, meaning it through a little electrophoresis, it makes the cells more porous so the oxygen and nutrients can get in to the cells in the mitochondria and the waste products can get out. And concurrently, it's helping to move charges in a similar way to exercise. So by moving these charges, you're able to directly charge the transmembrane potential without necessarily needing ATP to do that, or, I mean, easy water. Obviously there's other ways, but I'm just kind of going by mainstream. So really, in a nutshell, you know, healing is voltage, you know, and Jerry Tennant in his book was kind of the first to popularize that phrase, right? Yeah. Excellent, right? I mean, I first read that book right when it came out. In fact, when I wrote my book, I had a whole chapter inspired by him on voltage, you know, the cell voltage. So yeah, the PEMF is helping to increase cell voltage directly and indirectly. And in so doing, it increases pH because voltage is pH. And it's also improving oxygenation and microcirculation to get nutrients to the cells and waste products out. So by doing all of this, by bringing in oxygen and nutrients and taking all the waste out, you create more of, I like the analogy of a flowing river in nature, they're always very clean. When you're up in the mountains and you got these rivers flowing, they're just very clean water, right? Where you got a swamp on the other hand, where nothing's moving, it becomes a cesspool, right? So this is a problem that people with cancer, their lymph is stagnant. They don't have great circulation. And so it's like they end up in this cesspool situation where everything's stagnant. And this is the breeding ground for bacteria growth and viruses replication and cancer cells. I mean, cancers, it's all kind of related. It's the terrain, right? When we improve our biological terrain, it's like having fish in an aquarium, right? If it's a really dirty tank, I mean, you can try to add chemicals to clean up the water, but why not? You just change the water, you know, or, you know, you gotta clean it out. You gotta clean the tank and then the fish will be happy. You can't just add this and that and the other thing to try to we're going to add this little antimicrobial to our little tank here and help our fish with all this bacteria that's overgrowing, right? But the whole thing's just full of scum. You gotta clean all that out. So this is why, you know, PEMF is an integral part of healing, but obviously you still have to have the diet, hydration, other things. But PEMF will make all the nutrition you're doing because it increases microcirculation and absorption. It'll help all that to get delivered better to the cells and the waste products removed. It just creates that flowing river. Just imagine in the mountains, those really clean flowing rivers because of the movement. where a cesspool, swamp is stagnation. So we want to move out of stagnation by, of course, you got to move your body, doing like vibration or rebounding and, different skin brushing is a really good little thing to kind of get the lymph moving. Because typically with cancer, you have, people have stagnant lymph. So PEMF helps to get things moving, and then it helps to directly increase the charge of the cells. I call that kinetic and potential energy. It's improving the flows, and there's studies showing that PEMF helps to increase meridian flow, acupuncture flow. My friend Robert Benson called PEMF needleless acupuncture because she could see on her equipment similar benefits from PEMF using acupuncture. So it's increasing meridian energy, chi flow, it's increasing nerve flow, lymphatic flow, blood flow, air flow through the airways. That's movement, right? Kinetic energy. Then potential energy is stored energy, like in the cell. The cell voltage is like a stored energy. Because again, we need our batteries to be charged up. And then, of course, we discharge that. But we still need, so this is why I think everybody should use PEMF every day, just like you brush your teeth every day. And even if you're healthy, allowing the cells to breathe better. Again, when I say breathe better, I mean through the electrophoresis and all this movement. It allows nutrients and oxygen to go in, waste products to go out. Everything's flowing nice and easy. With cancer, everything's kind of closed off and everything's like blocked and things just aren't moving. And sometimes, emotions are a big part of that too. With the Biofield, you gotta work on the emotional. Sometimes there's a big emotional block that get everything like sludge, again, like the swamp, but now the swamp's in your Biofield with emotions that are repressed and traumas, right? So obviously there's always other layers to healing, but PEMF will work in conjunction with all these other things to help get things moving again, get your emotions moving, get your energy, your chi moving, get your blood, your lymph moving, and get everything charged up, increase that cell voltage and the mitochondrial membrane potential. Again, the voltages are stored in the mitochondria, cell, tissue, organ. Even our whole body has a stored voltage, right? Which the Chinese call like the Jing, the Qi and Jing. Jing is like the stored energy, right? And of course there's Shen, which is more the spiritualized.
Yeah. No, I think that I love actually that explanation because it ties so many things that we've talked about on this podcast together. And Eileen McCusick, we had her come in and talk about biofield tuning and, this idea. Yeah. So she came on and spoke with me about, clearing things and, what's in our field and how emotional trauma and things get kind of trapped. And she describes that as just like stuck, and so I love how you tied all of that together. And we've also had Thomas Seyfried talking about cancer as a metabolic condition and the Warburg effect and all of that. So this is really helpful, I think, for myself, and I'm sure for people to listen, to put these pieces together and how PEMFs, really is like just creating that movement and helping with the flow and helping with the oxygenation and the microcirculation and the acidity and all of that. So I actually really, really appreciate that explanation. And so, you said in there that you think really everyone should be doing PEMF, kind of like we brush our teeth. So I want to ask you, like, if someone was just healthy and like, what do you do in terms of using PEMF as like a regular routine? And then I know that it's different based on what someone's dealing with, but maybe we could talk a little bit about if someone was dealing with cancer, like what are the ways that they might use PEMF different than someone who's healthy? So we'll start with first, how do you use it in supporting health? Yeah.
So for prevention, the saying an ounce of prevention is worth a pound to cure. So it's called preconditioning, like in different types of sciences where you're doing things that increase your body's resiliency and your cellular resiliency. So it makes you stronger. I like to use the metaphor of shields up in Star Trek, like your shields are at 100%. So, because health is not just an absence of disease. Some people say, I went to my doctor. My doctor said I'm fine. But your shields might be only at 45%. But maybe they're enough to keep you where you're not getting Klingon torpedoes of ill health coming at you. And, it's enough to keep the disease out, right? But you're not thriving. So I always love Master Chow, who wrote the book Chronic Healing. He's got this beautiful little image of somebody's energy where it's kind of a dark little biofield, but then it gets brighter and then brighter and brighter. And I like that because it shows that health can be evolutionary. So just healthy. I mean, we should have different words for like healthy level 1, healthy level 2. It's like we got all these words for disease, but we don't have different words for different levels of good health. Because obviously an Olympic athlete has more metabolic energy than someone that doctors just say, oh yeah, you're healthy. But yet they're not very active and they don't really feel good most of the time. It's like, well, my doctor said I'm fine. So PEMF is helping us to go evolutionary by increasing cell voltage. And again, making your cells breathe better. I mean, so imagine just somebody like kind of gasping for breath. It's like maybe they're getting enough air to prevent them from dying, but it's not optimal. So the cells, when the cells are closed off or when there's not enough microcirculation, it's like the cells aren't breathing. Because again, it is breathing, right? Because we got to get oxygen into the cell, to the mitochondria, and then the carbon dioxide comes out. So the cells, I mean, we're breathing oxygen in and carbon dioxide out, right? The cells are doing that too. Cells are breathing in oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. But it's not through lungs, it's through the cell membrane. So by making the cells breathe better, you're just going to feel better than where you are now. So better is, I mean, good is good, but better is even better, and better yet is even better yet. So if you're an athlete, you can notice increased athletic performance. And with the IMRS, one of the devices I work with, they did this way back in the day. They did this video Fit for the Challenge, and they interviewed all these Olympic athletes that were using, back then it was called the VitaLife MRS 2000. And they would talk about how it increased their performance, helped them with recovery, all these things. But one thing I want to say about preconditioning is one study by Susskind and Walker showed that when you did PMF before, well, this is with mice, okay, they would deliberately, not very humane, I know, but they would deliberately injure the mouse. But if they did the PMF before, they recovered, I forget exactly by how much, it was like twice as fast or whatever. Even without doing PMF afterwards, they recovered quicker. And then they did the same test, only this time they didn't do PMF before, but then they did PMF after, and it recovered just slightly better, but I mean, it was out, but it wasn't too far off, meaning doing PMF before as a prevention worked almost as good to speed up the healing as PMF after. Almost, it's not quite. But now if you do both, it's even better, right? I mean, it just makes sense. So this is called preconditioning. And same thing with red light therapy too. Michael Hamlin and red light therapy experts talk about preconditioning all the time because it makes your cells more resilient. So that way, maybe if you fall down, you hurt yourself, but you don't break a bone. Or maybe you get COVID, but then you don't get it for very long. Whatever. I mean, whatever stresses, or maybe something really stressful enters your life, and maybe normally you'd get sick, but maybe you don't, because your cells have a stronger voltage. So your shields are at 100% maybe, or maybe again, 100% is ideal, but but it's a good metaphor because our biofield is a light field. So it is like the shields in Star Trek, right? So as our biofield grows, then the stressors, you got all this, it's called this guy that was into hormesis called it the homeodynamic buffer zone. And I like the word homeodynamic because we're not just homeostasis. People use that a lot. Oh yeah, we want to bring the body back to homeostasis. No, we don't. That's death. I mean, you don't want to be static. You want to, so he used the word homeo. I like that word because it's like a state of balance, but it's a dynamic balance, right? So we want he called it the homeodynamic buffer zone. I love that word. So whenever we use, he would call it hormetic stressors, because, a lot of things, red light, even certain spices they found, exercise, all these different ways you can precondition the cells to make them more resilient. And he would call this growing your homeodynamic buffer zone, which is like shields up in Star Trek. You're getting more and more shielding from disease, right? So this is why prevention is so important, because cancer, you just let the shields are down to 5%, or we'll say 15%. If we're going to go by cell voltage, we can say shields are down to 15%. So everything, all the torpedoes or things are coming in, we're vulnerable. You just breathe in a little gas or some fumes and it makes us sick. We don't have that buffer zone to shield from all the stresses of life. So that's one of the things along with other, obviously exercise and sleep, all these other things he talks about helps to grow. But PMF is another tool and you can add to that arsenal to increase cell voltage, increase energy, I do feel, again, we actually have a little bit of evidence with GDV in the biowell. Well, not just the biowell. My friend, William Vitalis works with Dr. Zachary Bush, who a lot of people know nowadays. He's becoming more well known. And they have a GDV scanner, and I sent them the IMRS map, and they did before and afters, and they could see, I don't know if you're familiar with GDV, it's gas discharge visualization. Some call it aura photography. I don't really like that word because people tend to discount it too quickly, knee jerk. You could say it's a biofield reader in a way, right? but it'll show you the volt. It uses three numbers: the energy joules of your biofield, the symmetry is your energy balanced, and the cohesiveness. So you want your biofield to be energetic, right? Joules of energy is energy. So you got more joules means you're brighter. So he saw with one IMRS session, people, their GDV their joules would go up, and their energy, if it was asymmetrical, if there was too much energy on one side or the other, it became more balanced, and it increased cohesiveness, which is because the biofield, you can have kind of like little tears or holes where energy is just kind of leaking out. So the cohesiveness means it smooths all those holes. It kind of makes it more cohesive. It kind of knits those holes so you're not losing energy, right? So you can see all those are the three big parameters with BioWell and GD. So that's another great validation that PEMF is really increasing our overall biofield energy. So it's not just cell voltage, it's the overall biofield energy. Of course, that makes sense because, our health is dependent on the quality of the health of our cells, right? So our overall biofield energy is in large part due to the 37 to 100 trillion cells in our body, depending on the read. Nobody seems to be able to agree on that. But we have, trillions of cells, probably around 37 trillion according to Google right now. But that's a lot of cells, 37 trillion, right? That's a big number. So if they all have a little 70 milliwatts of voltage, that all adds up, right? Or if you're only at 15 milliwatts, like in the case of cancer, that adds down a lot. So if it's so at the body level, it can really create situations where you, like with cancer, just have so much less energy than someone with, obviously, anybody that, if you know people with cancer, and you are depleted of your energy. I mean, sometimes people have cancer and they seem to be still active, but when it gets to a deeper, more advanced stage, you really because if there's no cell, how can you have energy if your cell voltage is so low, right?
Yeah. Well, and so in preconditioning, do you use PEMF once a day? Do you use it twice a day? Twice a day?
Yeah, twice a day is kind of recommended. I mean, you can do more. If you have more time, you can do more and you can do longer sessions. Even 8 minutes twice a day is, for a really busy person, does a lot. It's like brushing your teeth twice a day, But I mean, if you have more time, maybe you brush your teeth longer and you floss and you get the water pick out and you do all kinds of extra things because you have more. So it is advantageous to spend a little more time if you have more time. But we tell the busy people, just get at least 8 minutes twice a day as just a bare minimum. And people are like, oh yeah, I can do that. If you have more time, and you're going to when you like how you start feeling, it's like, well, I kind of want to do longer sessions.
Yeah.
And if you have a localized injury, then of course you want to spend that. We're just talking about preconditioning now.
But yeah, let's talk about how someone might be using it for recovery from, let's say, a surgery or whatever. Then, I mean, obviously you're not going to give specific protocols because if someone needs to do that and they need direction about what they need to do for their specific thing, but just kind of give us some sense of how that can be used for recovery.
Yeah. Well, surgery, there's a difference. We can talk about just spraining your ankle because surgery, when you have a wet wound that's got stitches, I do tell people wait for at least the stitches everything to dry up, because one of the things PEMF does really well is it makes the blood flow, because it decreases the viscosity of the blood, which is usually good. Most people, their blood's too thick and it's like maple syrup going through their vein. They have too high of viscosity because of all the sugar and all the stuff that's going on. And they're not drinking enough water, all these reasons. But when you get surgery though, sometimes PEMF works a little too well. So I tell people that you want the blood to clot. Wait for everything to clot first where you have the wound is dry. And even the doctors in Germany, they would say even right after surgery, you can use PEMF, just use it at a very low intensity, very gently. But I think just to play it safe, it's probably best just to wait for the stitches to, like the clots to form where you don't have a wet wound, right? Everything's clotted and everything's. But at that point, then you can start using PEMF and it will just help to stimulate. Again, according to the NASA study, 400% increase in stem cells. And again, when you hurt yourself, you got surgery or you're trying to recover, you're trying to create new cells, right? And you're reading the Healing with Voltage book, right? I mean, making new cells requires energy and space. That's what I tell people. Space is the other thing. So I don't want to get out too much on a tangent on this, but when cells divide, they got little receptors that sense if there's room to divide. So if you're in a body that's full of all kinds of fat cells and toxins and not enough water, it's like literally the cells have no room to divide to create new tissue. So in space means helping to detox, right? Getting all the toxins out of your body, making sure you're well hydrated and you got, everything's kind of flowing. But the energy, you need more voltage to create new cells. If you don't have enough voltage, it's hard to create new cells. I mean, mitosis is a very energy intensive process. You're taking one cell and it's dividing into two. I mean, that takes energy. So, or increasing just creation of stem cells, because we do typically have resident stem cells in all our tissues, right? So PEMF does help to then increase differentiation. It kind of wakes the stem cells up and helps them to create new tissue. So that's why we've seen people cut their healing time in half on average, because it stimulates stem cells, regeneration, it stimulates many growth factors, which have all these biochemical cascades that increase healing. I mean, it gets kind of complicated when you get into all the signaling molecules and all the different networks, but essentially it's doing a lot of really pro-healing things as far as like with the growth factors, the stem cells, et cetera, right?
And for someone with cancer who say they're past, or they're not having surgery, there's benefits to doing this for all the reasons that you said before. And correct me if I'm wrong, there's no data to say that people with cancer shouldn't do this for any reason, that PEMF is dangerous or problematic. I guess the big questions people might ask is like, well, can I do this during chemotherapy? Could I do it, while I'm having conventional therapies? And I don't know if you have experience with that or what your thoughts are.
No, we do have experience, but it's kind of a delicate thing because we have to always say, you have to follow your doctor's advice. And if your doctor says don't do it, I have to say don't do it, right? Even though my understanding is you absolutely would. If I had a loved one or myself had cancer, I would absolutely want them to be doing PEMF. In fact, we have like a 70-page packet of different like articles on PEMF and cancer. Or just a background on some of it's not directly to cancer, but some of it, Dr. Dowdar, I can't pronounce these names right, and Dr. Connolly, they show that PEMF helps and it's the voltage connection. By increasing cell voltage, just seems to kill the cancer cells. But again, increasing cell voltage also, what kind of complicates a little bit, why it sometimes takes time, is that some people's cell membrane integrity is not great. So if you don't, it's like a leaky capacitor, right? If you don't have, your cell membrane isn't healthy, it's hard for your cells to store charge. So PEMF, it's charging up, it's like trying to charge up a corroded battery. It gets kind of difficult, but if you can do all the nutritional things it kind of all works together, right? So I never think it's too late. I have a couple stage 4 testimonials with cancer. Of course, I can't say it treats, cures, or mitigates cancer, but, like Dr. Al Kennedy, he had stage 4 colon cancer and, used the IMRS and he did chemotherapy and surgery. Okay. So he did, but he was still feeling awful after all that. So he started using the IMRS and like in 3 months, he just turned around. He was doing good diet and other things, but he said it was the IMRS that really started to help him feel the difference. And this was in 2018. He became cancer free. And now he's still doing well to today. In fact, just my birthday was June 18th. Just this year, he wished me a happy birthday through Facebook. In fact, he even came to my house with his daughter. He wanted to shake my hand. He just wanted to. It was very moving, very touching. He happened to be in town. So that's a long time. Stage 4 colon cancer, still 7 years later, he's still doing well.
I love that.
That's a touching story. I actually have a testimony on my YouTube channel. So I've seen not just him, but his is just a touching case because, he came to my house and I got to know him and he keeps in touch with me and he's still doing well 7 years later.
So, what I would like to talk about something, Bryant, is there are a lot of these devices that are kind of cheap.
Oh, right.
And you can buy them on Amazon and I'm just wondering, can you speak to maybe the problems with some of these devices and what people need to be really cautious about when they're looking at purchasing PEMF?
Yeah. So I'm going to hide the name of the brand. I don't want to get you in any trouble, but I can just at least talk about the biggest scam in the PEMF industry. So I'm not going to disclose what brand this is, but the way you can identify these cheap Chinese mats, of course, this is probably just the podcast audio, but it's got the crystals, gemstone. It's got the gemstones or crystals, far infrared, negative ions. So they claim to have all these things. And I tell people if the PEMF mat you're looking at has crystals or gemstones in it, it's junk. And I can say this with a lot of confidence because guess how many of these mats I have? I got 12 of them. All the main brands. They're all the same. I mean, they literally all have the same cheap AM rod ferrite coils that you can get on Alibaba for 50 cents. In fact, you can get these mats. This is a popular one that I got one in Alibaba Direct, the same one for $109. They're selling it for like $1,000. So they're just buying these cheap garbage PMF mats and doing a whole lot of marketing because they got such a big profit margin. And but the worst part of them though is that the PMF signal is they're just pulsing 60 hertz from the wall. There's really no signal. It's a scam. I mean, and so it's really easy. And I tell people again, just to reemphasize, if you're looking at a device and it claims to have negative ions and gemstones, just run. There is not one good PMF device with gemstones that claims to have negative ions. And not that there's anything wrong with gemstones. It's just that, well, they're really low quality. If you cut these open and look inside, the gemstones are not good anyway. But it's just the identifier. It's just that's how you know it's junk. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say the brands, but I could go through a list of all the brands if you wanted me to. But
to avoid, yeah. I mean, I don't mind you saying the brands to avoid.
Let's just go through the popular ones. It's Higher Dose, Healthy Line, Healthy Wave, the Therasage TheraPro, Bond Charge, Kala, Grooney. There's one called Sparkle now. There's a couple, and they're just popping up like weeds because what a lot of companies are realizing. Oh, the Huga mat, this one, because Huga is like red light, and I'm noticing multiple red light companies now are throwing in a PMF, and they always, for whatever reason, are picking these cheap Chinese gemstone mats. And I did several. I'm doing some videos right now where I test. First of all, there's no measurable negative ions, so that's a scam. And I actually called Alpha Labs makes this expensive negative ion counter. That's one of their big marketing things. Look, you get PMF plus negative ions plus crystals plus far infrared. Wow, look at all this stuff, right? Well, measurably no negative ions. And the engineer who's got a PhD in superconductivity, pretty smart guy. He's the one that helped to design and make these devices to measure ions. He said you can't get negative ions from crystals. He says you got to heat it up to 1100 degrees and then you get both positive and negative. So not only is it measurably, and I did the test, and on my YouTube channel you can see the test. So there's 0 negative ions, which is one of their selling points. The red light therapy, some of them have red light therapy, little bulbs on them. I measured it, and I kid you not, I had $13 Christmas tree lights from Amazon. And the irradiance, this is a spectroradiometer, it's kind of an expensive one. And I measured the irradiance, and it was on these cheap devices, it was the same with Christmas tree lights. It's not therapeutic. And even Michael Hamlin, one of the experts, says you need at least 5 milliwatts per centimeter squared minimum, right? And these lights were like 1 to 1.5 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So that's a gimmick. But again, the worst part of it is their coils, they're just transmitting 60 hertz pulsed on and off with measurable dirty electricity. And I did a test on the Healthy Line showing that on the electric setting, I was getting over 100 volts per meter. And some people are sleeping on these. Now, by Trifield standards in their manual, they said you want to stay under 50 volts per meter, ideally. And I measured my power outlet. My power outlet was 100 volts per meter. So the electric field that you're laying on Healthy Line, some people sleep on these all night long, these mats. It's like laying on like a bunch of outlets right under your bed. At least the electric field, measurably. And again, I'm not just trying to bash these companies. This is all measurable, testable things. So those mats are the worst of the worst. And even if it was a clean 60 hertz, which it's not, 60 hertz has been shown to suppress melatonin. 60 hertz is not a good frequency to be using in a PMF device. So if you're just pulsing the wall current, of course, that's all there is. You don't have a signal generator. And again, I have 12 of these mats, and without exception, all those ones I mentioned and more, any with crystals or gemstones, they all have the same coils. They all pulse 60 hertz. The one exception is Healthy Line has this advanced controller, but I even measured that. And even their square wave was 60 hertz. And we did a test. So it's like, there's a lot I could say, but to me, that's the worst part of it. And if there is dirty electricity, there is dirty electricity, I can measure it. We know, and you've interviewed some of these people, that electrosmog is a contributor to cancer. It's not, it's something that it's going to make things worse, potentially, because we can't say that's settled science, because there's a debate, right? Even though I think the research is very convincing. There's contrary research, usually I think funded by big power companies and telecom companies, because 5G stuff, it's like, are you one of those 5G nutcases? It's like, No, actually, there's a lot of studies showing that 5Gs are harmful. You're just listening to the news every night or something, because that's just propaganda studies that's trying to hide this real information. And in Europe, they understand this better than the US here. So the last thing in the world, and this is why I'm so against these companies and why you see me doing a lot of stuff against them, because these are the top selling, sadly, mats right now, these cheap Chinese gemstone mats. And it's not PMF, it's EMF. It does the whole industry a bad name. And if I could have my way, I would either help to inspire these people to make their products better, or just put them out of business if they're not going to try to make their products better, because this is not helping people. And I'll say potentially harmful. I got to be careful, because yes, the science isn't settled, but if you think 5G and 60 hertz and electrosmog is unhealthy, I mean, then I'll let you make your own decision. On that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's the thing, though, is it is so confusing for people because they see these, things, and it's hard to know what is actually helpful. And if you're buying one of these mats because you want it to improve your health, but then it's 60 hertz and just basically electrosmog, that's not helpful and potentially harmful.
And in fairness, it's the electric field component of electrosmog, because their coils have such a high inductance, it smooths out the magnetic field. So, I don't know if you know this, but with electrosmog, when you test your house, you want to test both the magnetic and electric field, because they are different. Well, I mean, they're related, but I mean, the magnetic fields do penetrate deeper, but still, when you're laying on a mat that has a dirty electricity and electric field component, you get capacitively coupled, it's called, meaning there's a resonance between that dirty electricity in the mat and you. So like you're part of this almost capacitor system, and you can get little micro shocks because it's 100 volts per meter. That's high enough to cause these little, I mean, you're not going to lay on one of these mats and feel a shock, but it's below maybe your perception threshold, but it is happening. This is not good. No. I mean, let me just conclude with this. It's the same as using, remember back in the day when they were worse, electric blanket. So the electric fields in these Chinese gemstone mat devices I mentioned are the same kind of electrosmog as electric blankets. So if you think electric blankets are bad, then you think these are bad. Again, not everybody, people are like, oh, that's just your conspiracy theory. It's like, no, electric blankets aren't healthy. There's studies to show kind of detrimental effects. And now they're trying to make them a little better nowadays, but they're still not ideal, most of them that are out there.
Bryant, this has been so helpful. And if people, I know you do consulting for people who are interested in PEMF.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you want to look for a good device, if we had more time, we could talk about what to look for in a good PEMF device. But it's typically, the device is going to have a good coils, a good signal, with an actual signal generator that's actually making a good signal. That's got a high slew rate, a broad spectrum of frequencies, and the repetition rate should be in alignment with the time of day so that you get energizing frequencies in the morning and more relaxing at night. So those are in real briefing, the essential elements of a good PEMF device. And typically I recommend a full body device because again, you want to open up your meridians, which are from the top of your head, your bottom of your feet, your nervous system. I mean, all your body's main, like I call them fractal branching networks, circulatory, lymphatic, nervous, meridian. They go from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, right? So a full body mat opens up all those flows. And then you use a local applicant, any injuries or any localized issues.
If you could provide just your website, and we will link it in the show notes so that people can find your website. And I know that your cell phone and all your information is on there for people to contact you. But
well, I mean, you can just do BryantMeyers.com. All my information's there. So just my name, BryantMeyers.com. And yeah, my email's there, my phone number's there. It's not a really fancy website right now, but you can just, I just try to encourage people to give me a call. If you're in the market for a PEMF device, that's kind of my only criteria. And I'm really happy because I want to steer people in the right direction. I'm happy to help.
I love it. Well, and I think that we'll probably have you back for another conversation. I think red light would be something I would love to talk to you about, but thank you so much for being on the show today. And I know that our listeners are going to find it very helpful to have this information about PEMF.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, and definitely let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on Born to Heal. It's been a privilege to share this time with you. And I hope that today's episode has offered you valuable insights on your journey toward optimal health. Please consider subscribing, sharing this podcast with your friends, and leaving us a review. To learn more about how you can work with me, please visit katiedeming.com. You can find additional resources in the episode show notes linked below, and remember to join us next week as we continue to explore more holistic approaches to healing. Until then, this is Dr. Katie Deming, reminding you that just like me, you were born to heal. What if healing cancer didn't have to be so overwhelming and confusing? What if you could access a higher level of consciousness to accelerate healing? And what if you had a clear roadmap to follow, a path to lead you out of the fear and uncertainty? Hi, I'm Dr. Katie Deming. As an oncologist who's cared for thousands of patients, let me guide you safely through the fog. My 6 Pillars of Healing Cancer workshop series is now available, and it's not too late to join. Choose from a range of powerful workshops, each designed to support your healing journey, covering nutrition, emotional well-being, hydration, physical practices, the mind-body connection, and spirituality. Select only the workshops that align with you, or for a limited time, buy the entire bundle and enjoy significant savings. Don't miss this proven holistic roadmap to clarity and deep inner calm to support your healing process. Check the link in this episode's description to learn more and sign up today. Remember, you've got this.